Arguments about the relative merits of various World War II fighters will go on as long as aviation enthusiasts get together and have hangar sessions. These arguments usually get around to comparisons between the Spitfire and the Mustang. The reality is that there is no argument. The aircraft were designed around 10 years apart, and basic ideas of air fighting had changed dramatically over those years. The Spitfire was designed as a short-range interceptor and was superlative in that role. The basic design was also capable of a degree of development as its roles expanded, which surpassed all other types. The Mustang, on the other hand, was designed to a specification which called for a long-range escort fighter and was drawn up early in 1940 by the British as a result of experience with bomber raids into Europe. From initial specification to the first flight took a remarkably short 120 days, and the NA-73X left the ground for the first time on the 26th of October 1940. Its performance at altitude was mediocre until its V-1710 Allison was replaced by the Packard-built Merlin, at which time its development into one of the world's all-time great aircraft kicked in. The definitive development of the NA-73X was the P-51 Mustang, which, with its laminar flow wing giving range and manoeuvrability and the overall toughness of the airframe, saw frontline service for well over 40 years, finishing its military career with the Dominican Air Force in the 1980s. This brings us to Jeff Trappett's superb example named Eclat. This aircraft was one of 200 manufactured by CAC at Fisherman's Bend, emerging from the factory in 1948, making her 50 years old at the time this footage was shot. By the way, Australian-built Mustangs are regarded as the best of the best, and they're in great demand with Warbird collectors around the world. In August 1949, A68118 was allocated to number 78 Fighter Wing at Williamtown in New South Wales and flew training missions there until July 1950, when she was returned to CAC for modification. She remained there until April 1951, when she was moved to number 1 Aircraft Depot to await disposal. This eventually came in 1958, when she went to Wilmore Aviation Services, and after civilian conversion by Brooks Aviation at Moorabbin, she was placed on the civil register as VH Whiskey Alpha Sierra in August 1959 and moved to Bankstown. After only 12 months here, she was withdrawn from service and placed in open storage until June 1973, when she was moved to the Camden Museum of Aviation and returned to her military markings, becoming A68118 once again. By coincidence, her civil registration was then allocated to a Piper Cherokee, which I often flew in the late 1970s. A68118 came in from the cold in November 1978 when she was acquired by squadron leader Jeff Trappett, who at the time was CO of number 21 City of Melbourne Squadron, based at Laverton. Jeff was told she will never fly again, but with low airframe hours and the interior being in generally good shape, the restoration, whilst fully comprehensive, was not particularly demanding and was based on Jeff's determination to make her the best example of the breed flying in the world. She was moved to the workshops of Gippsland Aeronautics in the Latrobe Valley, emerging 12 months later in pristine condition. Carrying civil registration Alpha Golf Juliet, but resplendent in her military markings, A68118 left the ground for the first time in 22 years, during Easter 1981, performing faultlessly in Jeff's hands.
Well, the Mustang aerodynamically was very advanced for its day, which is why it was such a successful escort fighter, which is what it was designed to do, escorting the bombers long distances both across the Pacific to the Japanese raids and also, of course, in the European theatre. 6 or 8 hour missions at a time, single seat, so it's a great aeroplane because 2 hours is enough for me, I'll get out. The power plant is a V12 piston engine, originally designed and manufactured by Rolls-Royce, and this particular version is an American-built, licence-built Rolls-Royce Merlin, and it was actually built by the Packard Motor Company in America. So they built thousands of the things, you know, and mated the Merlin to the Mustang, which originally had a different sort of engine, and that's what made the combination of the aircraft and the Rolls-Royce engine made it the champion fighter that it is.
Jeff is a former pilot instructor at the RAAF Central Flying School and was leader of the Roulette's Marquis aerobatic team, and he's a dedicated Warbird restorer. His stable includes an immaculate Windjeel, seen here flown by Tony Pratt in formation with A68118, as well as a DC-3, which has recently emerged from a full restoration. With relatively low hours on the clock, Eclat is a truly magnificent example of arguably the best all-round Allied fighter of World War II, and Jeff's regard for her is well demonstrated by the care and attention which he lavishes on her, including many hours of polishing her aluminium skin to a high sheen. By the way, she's one of the few single-seaters in Australia to feature a second seat, a legacy of her civilian operations back in the late 1950s. A68118 would stand out in any Warbird company in the world, and she confirms Australia's place among the great aircraft restoration and preservation nations.